Nintendo thinks the gameplay found in Palworld is illegal. You've seen the hype, and if you haven't tried Palworld yet, you're missing out on one of the wildest spins ever put on the now age-old creature collecting genre. It's like Pokemon, sure, but then it adds that edge you didn't know you needed, resulting in something truly unforgettable. This is, of course, Pokemon with guns. For those familiar with this one, everyone's talking about how it flips the traditional creature bonding concept on its head, setting you in a gritty survival world where your pals are more than just adorable yet powerful monsters. They can be your workforce, your defenders, even your lifeline in this hostile open world environment. Need resources? You can set your pals to work in factories or build defences. Facing danger, arm them with weapons and they'll fight right beside you. Fans see Palworld as the shot of adrenaline the creature collecting genre has been begging for, a breath of fresh air after years of Nintendo's predictable Pokemon formula. But Nintendo, they're throwing a fit. The massive success of Palworld has Nintendo so rattled that they're scrambling to shut it down, with lawsuits crying foul over supposed infringements on their precious Pokemon IP. So, let me ask you, is Nintendo clinging to its stale monopoly on creature collecting as if anything remotely similar is some existential threat? Or are they simply protecting the integrity of a franchise it's built over decades, defending the unique charm and creativity that make Pokemon the global phenomenon it is? We will discuss all of this in depth today, but something that is certainly true is that we're at a point where many people feel that instead of innovating or stepping up to the challenge of Palworld's greatness, Nintendo would rather stifle anyone daring to shake up the genre, trying to convince fans that only they can make creature collecting games. Fans see Palworld as a bold new direction, but Nintendo, they see it as competition they can't control, so they'd rather crush it than let it grow. But regardless of our personal feelings about the situation, we have to ask, is Nintendo justified in pursuing what many see as a morally grey lawsuit? Let's find out. I am Lady Decade, and let's get this investigation underway. This is the nasty Nintendo vs. Palworld illegal infringement lawsuit. There's something about a policewoman's uniform that just arrests your attention, isn't there? Maybe it's the crisp, no-nonsense look, the shiny badge that practically screams, "Respect my authority." Or perhaps it's just the confidence that radiates from knowing she can handle anything from a speeding ticket to making sure the sketchiest British citizens are up to date on their TV licence. Thanks to my awesome Patreon backers, today I've gone all out with a special Officer Jenny-inspired look that's been an absolute click magnet. As a token of my appreciation, I've added a collection of policewoman-themed shots to my behind-the-scenes Patreon-exclusive cosplay library. So, if you're a long-time viewer who needs a little nudge to get on the right side of the law and my Patreon, then maybe it's time to give me some backup. After all, this highly classified content is behind bars and a paywall, and you're definitely going to want to join it on the inside. As you will be aware, Palworld, the action-packed survival adventure from indie studio Pocket Pair, is making waves in the gaming world. Released in early access in January 2024 for Windows, Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S, Palworld's lunacy has captivated players ever since. The game takes place on the fictional Palpagos Islands, a sprawling open-world environment that players explore and survive in. As already mentioned, much of the gameplay involves capturing creatures called pals and utilising them in various ways we outlined earlier. But before a lawsuit was even actioned, fans of Palworld had already begun noticing the striking similarities between this game and Pokemon before Pocket Pair was faced with Nintendo's ire. So let's dive into the parallels and differences between these two IPs. Much like Pokemon, the central part of Palworld lies in capturing creatures with unique appearances, types and abilities. Players are encouraged to collect pals with a variety of abilities, strengths and elemental types, which play into their effectiveness in battle and utility for tasks. This creature collecting and battling aspect is core to the game, making Palworld feel very similar to the traditional Pokemon experience, where each creature has distinct qualities that affect gameplay. Just as Pokemon are categorized by types like fire, water, grass, electric, etc., pals also come with elemental properties that determine their strengths and weaknesses. For example, a fire-type pal may be strong against grass-type pals, but weak against water-type pals. This familiar typing system allows players to make strategic choices in combat, just as they would in a Pokemon game. Players who are familiar with Pokemon's battle strategies will find it easy to transition to Palworld's elemental matchups, as this is well-trodden territory. In addition to this, in Palworld, players can breed pals to create offspring that may inherit desirable traits from their parents. This mechanic mirrors Pokemon's breeding system, where trainers can breed Pokemon to pass down abilities, traits, or even specific moves. Breeding in Palworld allows players to customize their collection further, giving them the chance to create stronger or more specialized pals for battle or other in-game tasks. For those familiar with the creature collecting genre beyond just Pokemon, it's well known that games in this style often share similar mechanics. For example, Yokai Watch and Cassette beasts also feature comparable elements, from capturing creatures to using them in battles. Speaking of Cassette beasts, when it comes to these sorts of games, Cassette Beasts is an outstanding RPG that takes a classic creature collecting formula and gives it a mature, inventive twist. Unlike Pokemon, which focuses on more accessible gameplay and a family-friendly world, Cassette Beasts adds depth with complex combat mechanics, allowing you to mix and fuse monsters to create new, unique forms. Its darker storyline delves into themes of self-discovery and identity, and even explores a bit of the supernatural, creating a setting that resonates well with adult players. The world feels more mysterious and haunting, and the narrative carries a subtle, nuanced tone that gives it a mature edge Pokemon usually doesn't touch. It feels graphically very similar to Pokemon's Black and White versions of some of the greatest Pokemon games ever, in my opinion, but much more grown up and refreshingly challenging. With an incredible 52% discount, you can grab this standout indie game for just $10, and there's even a deal on the deluxe edition, which includes a fresh DLC side story. Using my affiliate links, you'll also find gigantic discounts on thousands of titles, from AAA blockbusters to indie gems and retro classics, including some of the most popular games this year, like Space Marines 2, Black Myth: The Wukong, Metaphor, and Sparking Zero. Monster Hunter fans can even snag a 24% discount on a Monster Hunter Wilds pre-order. It's a chance to explore some amazing games without breaking the bank. Happy shopping, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. Since its release, one of the more controversial aspects of Palworld is the visual resemblance between certain pals and existing Pokemon. Some pals have sparked debate among fans and critics alike for appearing too similar to certain Pokemon, both in terms of general design and type combinations. This has led some players to label Palworld as a Pokemon clone, although the developers claim their inspirations come from a wide range of creature designs. The designs of Lucario and Anubis, for example, look strikingly similar to each other. In addition, the game has been embroiled in controversy over accusations that it may have used AI tools in the development of its creatures. These suspicions largely stem from the strong resemblance between many of the pals and Pokemon. Many players and critics have noted that design similarities, like we just showcased, go beyond homage, leading some to speculate that AI might have been used to generate designs that skirt the line between familiarity and originality. One key factor fueling these accusations is Pocket Pair's history with AI technology. The studio previously released a game titled AI Art Imposter, which integrated AI-generated images as part of its gameplay. This background, along with statements by Pocket Pair's CEO Takaro Mizobe, who has publicly expressed interest in AI's potential applications, has led some to question whether Palworld might be an extension of their exploration into AI-assisted game creation. Speculation around this has been further fueled due to players noticing Palworld's rapid development timeline and level of polish compared to most other games from smaller studios. Video Games Chronicle would state that reports indicate that much of the game's character concept work was handled by a single graduate student, which has sparked questions about how feasible such rapid production could be without some form of AI assistance. With AI tools able to accelerate concept design, some in the gaming community believe it could explain the game's speed to market and the high volume of creature designs. Games Radar reports that Pocket Pair has consistently denied these accusations. In a public statement, the company's global community manager clarified, "We didn't AI generate any pals. Our artists are fantastic and we're so lucky to have them." Despite this assertion, the controversy persists, reflecting broader debates in the gaming community over the role of AI in game development, the authenticity of artistic contributions, and the ethical implications of its use. But is any of this grounds for Nintendo to sue Palworld? Well, no, not on the grounds of copyright infringement at least. Despite all of the similarities, it would be practically impossible for Nintendo to pursue a lawsuit against Palworld with this reasoning, and here's why. Although Palworld and Pokemon share the concept of catching monsters, copyright law focuses on protecting specific expressions, not broad ideas. Just as various game genres overlap without legal consequences, the concept of monster catching itself isn't owned by any one company. In fact, the original idea of monster catching traces back to the 1980s game Megami Tensei, released years before Nintendo's world-famous Collectathon, and like Pokemon and Megami Tensei, there are a lot of huge differences between Palworld and Pokemon which make them very, very distinct franchises. For example, unlike Pokemon, Palworld incorporates survival mechanics, which require players to manage their characters' hunger and health, gather resources, and craft items to survive in a harsh world. This involves players having to forage or hunt for food, build shelter, and defend themselves against both hostile creatures and environmental challenges, giving Palworld a more intense survival feel. This survival aspect pushes the game into territory more familiar to fans of titles like Ark, Survival Evolved, or Rust, rather than traditional Pokemon games. Palworld offers a complex base building system where players can create and customize their own home base, adding structures, storage, and other utilities. Pals can also be assigned to perform specific tasks around the base, such as farming, producing resources, or even operating machinery. Pokemon, by contrast, focuses primarily on creature collection, battling, and exploration without any focus on survival or construction. But differences, of course, do not stop there. One of the most striking differences between Palworld and Pokemon is the combat system, which includes firearms and other weapons. Players and their pals can infamously use guns in combat, gameplay we will, of course, never see in any official Pokemon game. This completely changes the tone of battle significantly. Rather than turn-based or tactical battles, Palworld opts for a more chaotic, real-time combat system where both players and pals can take direct action in the heat of battle. Alright, so while investigating Palworld for the heinous crime of borrowing ideas from Pokemon, I am struggling to see the problem yet. I'm like, so you're telling me they're capturing magical creatures, making them fight like every other monster catching game that's ever been released? So what's the real crime here? Do Nintendo not like that they gave them guns? Look, I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like Palworld is just teaching Pikachu some survival skills which should be celebrated. And who doesn't love a Second Amendment Pikachu? As you can see from comparing these games thus far, they are a lot more different than they appear on the surface. Simply having similar looking creatures to Pokemon likely isn't enough to constitute copyright infringement because copyright law protects specific expressions of ideas, not the ideas themselves. Copyright law copies the unique and original design of a particular creature, not the broader concept. In this case, the idea of a creature like a fire-breathing lizard can't be copyrighted. Instead, it's Charizard's unique combination of traits, like its specific design, colour, proportions, and distinct look, that are protected. Fortunately, this means that other games can have their own fire-breathing creatures as long as these creatures are distinct enough in their details. In addition to this, of course, creature collecting games often draw on similar inspirations like folklore, mythology, and nature, which naturally lead to some overlap in creature types and themes. Just having electric rodent-like creatures, for example, doesn't infringe on Pikachu's copyright unless it closely copies Pikachu's unique design elements. Copyright law acknowledges that creators within the same genre genre might develop similar ideas, so as long as the creatures in Palworld aren't near identical to specific Pokemon, the designs are generally considered distinct. Even if some of the designs do look a little too close for comfort in places. Courts have generally recognised that artists can create works that feel similar without being direct copies, as long as they are sufficiently different in appearance and execution. For example, the Egyptian god Anubis and Lucario do look somewhat similar, so of course there is going to be some overlap, whether intentional or not. For Palworld to face copyright issues, the Pals would need to be considered derivative works, meaning they'd have to take protectable aspects of existing Pokemon characters and modify them rather than creating something new, something rather hard to prove without very concrete evidence. But of course, this has yet to prevent Pocket Pair from being sued by Nintendo anyway. Unsurprisingly, the similarities between Palworld and Pokemon didn't go unnoticed by either the Pokemon Company or Nintendo. While Palworld appears to be in the clear on the copyright front, in September 2024, the companies filed a lawsuit against Palworld, citing patent infringement relating to the game's mechanics rather than creature designs. The lawsuit claims that Palworld borrows too heavily from patented gameplay elements central to Pokemon, which is how such a lawsuit has been actioned. Game Rant would report on the 19th of September 2024 that Pocket Pair would publicly acknowledge the lawsuit filed against them by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. In their official statements, Pocket Pair expressed that they have received notice of the lawsuit and would commence appropriate legal proceedings and investigations into the claims of patent infringement. They emphasised their current unawareness of the specific patents they were accused of infringing upon, stating they had not been notified of such details, but would reiterate to their fanbase that they are just a small indie game company based in Tokyo with the simple goal of creating fun games, with them expressing gratitude for the support from their fans. Given the significant differences between Pokemon and Palworld, news of Nintendo's lawsuit against Palworld's developer Pocket Pair instantly left many fans feeling disheartened and even disgusted with Nintendo. What a bunch of bastards! As an industry giant, many see Nintendo as leveraging its immense resources to stifle a much smaller indie developer whose game, while sharing some genre similarities, doesn't directly compete with Pokemon or confuse its audience. For many, this feels like a blatant attempt by Nintendo to monopolize the creature collecting genre rather than embracing diversity and encouraging creativity within it. In fact, some theorise it's the differences between this game and other creature collecting titles that have provoked Nintendo into attacking this one. One thought circulating among fans is that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are especially bothered by Palworld's inclusion of guns and darker themes. Palworld sets itself apart from Pokemon with gameplay that allows players and creatures to wield firearms, introducing a level of violence not seen in Nintendo's family-friendly franchise. Some believe that Nintendo, known for its carefully curated kid-friendly brand, may have been particularly uneasy about Palworld's pals, creatures similar to Pokemon being placed in gritty, combat-heavy scenarios. This drastic shift in tone makes Palworld feel like an edgier, mature version of Pokemon, with Nintendo potentially believing that this affects their own brand's wholesome image by association, resulting in Nintendo's aggressive legal response. Fans who grew up with Nintendo's games see this sort of behaviour as a betrayal of the company's fun image, as it appears to prioritise protecting its bottom line over allowing other creators to interpret and expand on genre ideas and innovate. This heavy-handed legal approach continuously makes the beloved company seem like less of a champion of gaming and more like an overprotective gatekeeper and vexatious litigator. Essentially, to many, making them look like the scum of the earth. Many see aggressively pursuing copyright and patent claims, especially in creative fields, as deeply damaging to artistic expression and innovation. Copyright and patents should be used as shields, not swords. For example, it's in the name of copyright protection, not attack. Aggressive protectionism like this is absolutely pathetic and, in my opinion, it hampers the natural cycle of creative freedom, resulting in restrictive landscapes defined more by legal boundaries than artistic integrity. This kind of legal action creates a culture of fear where smaller creators might avoid doing certain things to avoid legal trouble. Over time, this narrows the scope of what gets created and makes art less about exploration and more about ownership. And in my opinion, Nintendo are repeat offenders when it comes to these ethical crimes against art, regularly acting like opportunistic scumbags when given the legal wiggle room. Due to these morally unethical practices, Nintendo now built up a hugely negative reputation for taking an aggressive, no-holds-barred approach to protecting its intellectual property, often to the detriment of fans, independent creators, and even the broader gaming community. In fact, Nintendo has become notorious for unleashing shameless lawsuits against anyone who dares to engage with its content in a way that it hasn't explicitly sanctioned. From pursuing massive fines against fan-made ROM sites to stifling innovation with patent claims, Nintendo seems determined to maintain an iron grip on its assets, regardless of the collateral damage it results in. One prime example is Nintendo's lawsuit against ROM Universe, a fan-run website that offered copies of classic Nintendo games for players who couldn't access them through official channels or wanted to revisit the past without shelling out money for Nintendo's often overpriced ports. Rather than seeking a middle ground or offering a fan-friendly solution, Nintendo ruthlessly pursued the site, ultimately winning $2.1 million in damages. This kind of legal strong-arming might have lined Nintendo's pockets, but it's also crushed a source of nostalgia for fans who loved and wanted to celebrate Nintendo's old games. Games that Nintendo has largely kept locked away in its vaults, except for the occasional re-release with a hefty price tag. They make many great games, but they are a horrible company in some ways. As for their recent legal proceedings against Palworld, Nintendo's ruthlessness isn't limited to companies, it extends to independent creators, developers, and the very community that has supported the brand for decades. In 2024, Nintendo filed a lawsuit against the developers of Yuzu, an emulator that allowed players to experience Nintendo Switch games on their PCs. Nintendo cracked down hard, forcing Yuzu's developers into a settlement that included ceasing development and paying damages. Nintendo's actions here reek of a company eager to squash any way of playing its games outside of the strict and expensive limitations it imposes. Through these actions, Nintendo has proven time and again that it is willing to crush anything, be it fan sites, small companies, emulators, or independent creators, that stands between it and total control over its intellectual property. So, it's no surprise that they're going after Palworld, but what exactly did they apparently infringe? On the 8th of November 2024, Pocket's Pair posted a statement on their website regarding the lawsuit, stating, "As announced on the 19th of September 2024, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo Company Limited, hereinafter referred to as the plaintiffs, have filed a patent infringement lawsuit against us. We have received inquiries from various media outlets regarding the status of the lawsuit, and we would like to report the details and current status of this case as follows. The plaintiffs claimed that Palworld, released by us on January the 19th, 2024, infringes upon the following 3 patents held by the plaintiffs, and are seeking an injunction against the game and compensation for a portion of the damages incurred between the date of registration of the patents and the date of filing this lawsuit." They would go on to list the 3 patents which Nintendo are targeting, which we shall discuss in a moment, and a summary of the claim stating, "The claimants want an injunction against Palworld's payment of 5 million yen, plus a late payment damages to Nintendo Company Limited. Pocket's Pair promises its audience that it will continue to assert this position in this case through future legal proceedings, but will refrain from responding individually to inquiries regarding the case." So, keeping this in mind, what does all of this even mean? Well, the 10 million yen the claimant is asking for is nothing in comparison to the amount of money Palworld has likely generated. The total figure only amounts to about $65,000 but the injunction against the game appears to be a lot more sinister. If Nintendo and the Pokemon Company secure an injunction against Palworld, the repercussions could go far beyond a simple legal ruling. An injunction could mean an immediate and complete halt on all sales and distribution of Palworld, preventing new players from joining and enjoying the game. For fans who have come to appreciate Palworld's fresh take on monster catching, Nintendo's aggressive legal action would appear as a calculated move to squash competition rather than protect legitimate interests. Moreover, the injunction could extend to stifling any further development or updates of Palworld. In the gaming world, as we more than know by this point, updates are crucial for fixing bugs, improving gameplay, and expanding content to keep players engaged. By freezing Palworld in its current state, Nintendo's injunction could effectively sabotage the game's potential growth and evolution, blocking any patches or new content from reaching fans. This is a potentially underhanded way for the corporate giant to be able to successfully limit players' access to choices in the monster-catching genre, a genre that Nintendo did not even invent but has capitalized on for years. Imagine a world where Megami Tensei, home of the Persona series, legally crushed Pokemon in its maiden year for featuring many of the same mechanics. That's the despicable potential scenario that we're looking at taking place here. Adding to this, an injunction could prohibit all marketing or advertising for Palworld, making it nearly impossible for the developers to attract new players or even sustain interest among existing ones. Cutting off all avenues of promotion is a ruthless move on Nintendo's part, underscoring just how far they're willing to go to shut down a small competitor. For an industry behemoth, silencing any visibility of Palworld's borders on monopolistic behaviour, squeezing out any alternative games of tactics that seem more about eliminating competition than any genuine concern over intellectual property. But then again, what's new with Nintendo? The 3 patents cited by the Pokemon Company and Nintendo in their lawsuit against Palworld are crucial to understanding the specific claims of infringement. These patents each cover distinct aspects of gameplay, mechanics, and design that Nintendo believes are essential to its intellectual property in the monster-catching genre. But to break it down into terms as simple as possible, essentially Nintendo is claiming exclusive rights to be able to make games where you throw balls at monsters to catch them, have said monster follow you before actioning them to launch into battle, and the ability to ride your creatures as steeds. PC Gamer would report on this situation, essentially stating that Nintendo's decision to file a lawsuit against Palworld reeks of opportunistic bullying. The timing and strategy behind it appear more calculated than concerned with genuine patent infringement. When Nintendo first announced the suit, it broadly accused Palworld of infringing on multiple patent rights, but suspiciously left out specifics, leaving fans and industry observers in the dark. Only after Pocket Pair's official report did we learn the specific patents Nintendo claims Palworld is infringing. What's even more questionable is that Nintendo's patents, the very foundation of their lawsuit, were filed and granted after Palworld had already hit the market in January 2024. By strategically filing these patents after Palworld footage began circulating, Nintendo appears to have tailored its claims specifically to target the game, sculpting its legal tools for a suit it may have been planning long before. PCGamer.com reports that they reached out to an IP attorney named Kirk Sigman, who explained to them that this practice enables Nintendo to fine-tune patents to target specific elements of a competitor's game. Essentially, it is an almost predatory tactic that feels more like corporate warfare than legitimate IP protection. Pure scumbaggery. According to Sigmund, even if Pocket Pair could potentially win, the sheer cost of hiring specialists and putting together a defense team could bleed the company dry. Nintendo seems fully aware of this financial toll, using its vast resources as a weapon to drain Pocket Pair financially and possibly intimidate other small developers from ever attempting anything remotely similar to Pokemon. Nintendo's reputation for wielding its legal power with impunity is well documented, but the risks here aren't entirely one-sided. In a twist, the lawsuit gives Pocket Pair a chance to challenge the validity of Nintendo's claims by proving that these areas aren't as original as Nintendo would have everyone believe. If Pocket Pair can show that core concepts in Nintendo's patents have existed in other works, Nintendo's overly broad patents could backfire, potentially leading to their invalidation. This approach by Pocket Pair wouldn't just be a victory for one small developer, it could pave the way for a much-needed overhaul in how companies like Nintendo use patents to suppress competition. But as we know, a smaller company competing in the courtroom against a company with the financial might of Nintendo certainly isn't a fair fight. So, defeating them will be a challenging feat. It's hard to imagine that a corporation like Nintendo, with its billions in revenue, genuinely feels threatened by a smaller competitor. This heavy-handed approach looks less like a defense of its own IP and more like an attempt to stomp out any spark of creativity that doesn't bear the Nintendo brand. For Palworld to continue existing in any form, Nintendo's legal power play might force the developers into a position where they must strip or drastically alter core features that define the game. For fans, this would likely mean a watered-down version of Palworld that's been forced to give up what made it distinct. Rather than respecting the game's originality and allowing it space to breathe, Nintendo seems bent on controlling every aspect of the monster-catching genre, undermining creativity and leaving fans with only what Nintendo deems acceptable. Adding insult to injury, this legal blitz would come with a steep financial toll. The costs of this suit aren't about recouping lost revenue for Nintendo, they're a calculated attack on a small team trying to offer something new in a crowded market. For a corporation that continually claims to support innovation and creativity, Nintendo's actions here suggest a different story, one where any game that resembles their own is fair game for a legal crusade. Nintendo's pursuit of an injunction against Palworld paints a bleak picture of an industry giant unwilling to tolerate even the smallest potential competition. Nintendo seems intent on shutting down any challenges in ways that feel more predatory than protective. For fans who simply want more choices and a fresh experience in monster-catching games, Nintendo's approach here shows how far it's willing to go to protect not just its IP, but its monopolistic hold on a beloved genre. And that, my friends, is worrying. Don't forget, I can score you a massive discount on Cassette Beasts and up to 90% off thousands of other awesome games, including the biggest hits. Or, if you'd rather support me directly and get a little something special in return, you can get behind the bars for my exclusive Officer Jenny cosplay photos and more by joining me on Patreon. Don't make me issue a patrol call, as, trust me, this is one arrest you won't mind.